This meeting is being recorded.
All right, we got that out of the way. Okay, a couple housekeeping items that we start with all of these is give yourself a name. So I think everybody on here is pretty good. I see everybody's assigned themselves their name. But if it's like a phone number or just iPhone, we like to know who you are. So you can rename yourself in the Zoom settings. We do try to keep the chat open. So if you have questions, you can open the little chat box, as you can see here, and then we'll try to monitor that and keep track of questions so that we make sure we get to everyone's questions. So that's a good way to do that. There's a raise hand function. I'm the host, so I can't actually demonstrate that, but there is, I think if you hover over your little toolbar and go to more, there's a raise hand option. So if you'd like to speak, raise your hand, and that way we know that you have something to say and we can get to you in a timely manner. And as always, please keep yourself on mute, not mute. Mute when not speaking in order to minimize background noise. So, and if I get a lot of background noise, I have the ability to individually mute people, so I may do that. Please don't be offended. You can unmute yourself. So yeah, all that good stuff. We have a few announcements. So we just wanted to let everybody know that as of starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing a swag sale that's 10% off. And we should be sending out an email tonight regarding that as well, but we thought we'd announce that here and let everybody know the Black Friday swag sale is going on. So 10% off if you want to head over to our swag store and take a look at what we've got going on. Lots of good stuff there. And also Embark, our breed club partner, is doing their Black Friday sale. So you can get, if you're interested in doing an Embark, they call it the Embark Breeders Kit, but it's really if you want to, sorry, I'm admitting people. If you want the what I call a full DNA Embark panel on your dog, if you're interested in that, and it does include furnishings and a lot of information on coat, and then some other things as well, the DNA COI, that kind of thing. They're doing a Black Friday sale with the code SNIF. So if you go to our website on Poodle Pointer Society, and then there's a link there that you can use to get to the Embark and use that code if you're interested in doing a DNA test on your dog. Okay, so format and progression, we've already done part one, so I'll skip past that. Thank you again to Andy Doak for joining us and being our first speaker.
Alicia.
Yes.
One more announcement.
Yes.
We have the Poodle Pointer calendars at the printer.
Oh, yay!
And you can pre-order them now if you would like.
Yeah, the Poodle, I think, honestly, guys, I think this is the best year we've had yet. They're really great. The design team at Rave Communications did an awesome job. Go check it out and order your 2023 calendar. Okay, so part two, we're doing the duck search with Larry, and then part three is going to be January 17th, fieldwork and steadiness with Herb Christian of the Buckeye chapter, and part four on March 21st, 2023, healing, steady, and steady at the blind with Roy Ames. So with that, we'll introduce Larry Stone. He's the senior NAVHDA judge and clinic leader, and he's also the owner of Stone's Throw Poodle Pointers in Bend, Oregon. And he has graciously given his time tonight to talk to us about the duck search part of the utility test and talk through some things, you know, what it's about, what judges might be looking for, you know, things you can train for, and just kind of an overall conversation to answer any questions you may have. And we'll go through it. So Larry, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we can get started however you like.
Okay, well, thank you, Alicia. First, I'd just like to say she was being pretty generous when she said that we will answer any questions you may have. I've been doing this 20 years. I have questions all the time. So we will try to at least respond and give you some insight and some perspective on what's going on and how the duck search functions. The first slide, Alicia has up here shows the different categories, water, field, judged throughout, and it has the duck search. What you're going to see, and this is one of the reasons duck search is so important, is duck search is one of those 4 categories that you must achieve a 4 in to receive a prize 1. So you have duck search, pointing, desire, and nose. Those are the 4 that you must have a 4 in to achieve prize 1. That's not the only criteria. What we do is I tend to break it down when I'm helping local NAVHDA members to put it into perspective that those are the categories that NAVHDA has assigned the highest weight to. So when you look at this, a lot of people love to spend time in the field working on steadiness, and I agree, it's very important. But when you look down that prize 1 column, and you start looking at steady by blind, remain by blind, steadiness on game, a score of 3 in those categories is still a prize 1 achieving score. So I just offer that as some perspective, a means to maybe help you prioritize. And maybe if you're looking for a prize 1, then you might want to put the weight of your training into those items. And if you look at them, one might argue that pointing for most of our dogs is an instinctual act. Desire, hereditary, and training have a lot to do with the desire a dog achieves during their performance. And nose is very much an inherited trait. So duck search is the one thing that you can influence the most through exposure and training. And with that, if we can go to the next slide, Alicia. And I apologize for this being itty bitty. And one of the things that that I really detest, and I did not appreciate at all during my careers, is death by PowerPoint. So I promise you, we will not take you on the verge of your mortality with PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to read this to you. I think you can read it yourself. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. It is in the Ames book. The only thing I want to point out is the test is the use of nose, cooperation, desire, obedience, and stamina. And it places the dog in an environment where the handler cannot see the dog, and there's not going to be physical contact with the dog through this event, or there shouldn't be. The dog that's dependent on the handler for hand signals or commands does not score well in a duck search, because we want to see the initiative and the desire that the dog displays on its own. And with training and exposure, your dogs will develop their own search and criteria. They learn very quickly that cover means ducks, and they move to cover. Also, we'll just point out real quickly that the minimum size is a 1 acre pond that is in, how would I say it, in the means of being updated. I think the last time I looked at the judge's handbook, they were advising a minimum of 2 acres. And I hope that that gets transferred to the Ames book. But, there are places, especially in the arid West, where 2 acre ponds are few and far between. 1 acre is attainable. What happens in this event is, prior to the handler and their dog coming down to the water, judges are going to place a duck in the pond. It can be thrown in. It can be placed by a kayak, canoe, what have you. It depends on the water and how the senior judge manages the test. But it is a duck where the feathers or the primary flight feathers on one wing are removed, generally pulled, render the bird flightless but highly mobile, and then that's placed in the water. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. We'll just get right out of the narrative. They can read the narrative. What you're going to see is when you perform the duck search, your handling judge will bring you down to the water's edge. They will give you a direction to point and fire. And once you point and fire, brief pause and you can send your dog. They will not have you point and fire in the direction the duck is. The duck will be off the line that you fired. On this is a utility card, and it's itty bitty. So I would suggest that you go to your Ames book and take a look at it. It's just going to reinforce what I told you earlier about the 4 in duck search, point, nose, and desire. It goes through and explains, or at least demonstrates visually, how those columns represent prize 1. The far left column of numbers under each category is prize 1. Prize 2 is the center. Prize 3 is the far right. We go to the next slide. Okay, there's some differences between UPT and UT, and I'm not going to go into all of them. You have a water search or a duck search in each group. There are some differences in the sense that in utility, it's a live duck, and it's generally placed a further distance from your start point or your release point for your dog than would be in the utility prep tests. The utility prep test, it's a dead bird. It's placed in the cover, generally a shorter distance. But once again, judging teams have a lot of latitude due to the structure of the pond and where cover is. There are places where, you know, the first cover may not be for 70, 80 yards. Well, that's the pond. And that's what's going to be used. And options for placing the duck may be minimal. Judging teams work very well in analyzing the water and determining what are optimum ways to use it. And there may be more than one optimum way to use a pond. The general performance standard is, to me, quite similar. Differences between the dead duck and the live duck really separates the two, because the live duck is on the move. It feels pressure of the dog getting close. So the dog has to understand how to track a duck in water, in cover, and over open water. And if you've never seen a dog track a duck over open water, it's kind of amazing the first time you see it, because you don't believe it. With that, I'm not going to go into the walking at heel, remain by blind, and those differences. That can be covered in another class if it wasn't covered by Andy in the first one.
We're covering that in the 4th section.
Okay, so we can move on.
There we go.
That's a dog. So what's being judged? We covered that earlier, in that the dogs on a duck search, you have everything: nose, desire, stamina, cooperation, obedience. One of the things that kind of gets lost to people is, while a retrieve is not required to attain a 4 in duck search, we all must be cognizant of the fact that that is the purpose of the duck search, for your dog to go out there, search for wounded game, make contact, track it down, capture it, and retrieve it to hand. That is the purpose of the event. You are simply not penalized if your dog doesn't accomplish the actual retrieve within the time allowed. Because if the dog's demonstrated if the dog has demonstrated enough that the judges feel a fair judgment can be rendered, they will stop the event. And notice I said a fair judgment. Just because they stop it before your dog catches a duck doesn't mean you failed, and it doesn't mean you got a 4. It just means that they've seen enough to render in their minds a fair judgment. And realize that this is the consensus of 3 judges. These are people that are skilled and have experience. So when they call it, it's generally on the money. They know where they're at and the score that they've arrived at. It's easier to demonstrate than explain some of these things, and we'll get into it as we get into my methodology for training. If we move on, please. This is just something you might want to keep in your mind, and I'm going to use a gal I partner up with and train with, Meg Eden. She's an old field trialer, highly successful German wire hair gal. And we have fun with this every year because we argue what came first, the chicken or the egg. I do duck search and steadiness and all my water work before I steady up in the field. She is a firm believer in just the opposite from her field trial background, is she wants to do the field work. She wants some steady, rock solid, or as she would put it, a well-broke dog before she even goes down to the water and does any of the water steadiness. My point is there's 100 different ways to train your dog. Order that you train in and so forth. That's what you need to determine. What works best for you. If you're starting your training in certain areas of the country in December or January, you're probably not heading to the water. But I start with the water and I work towards the field. With that, just something to think about, make your own decisions. And frankly, the group you might train with will influence you more in that than anything that I'm going to share with you here. Because groups and training with other people, other dogs, very important when you get to utility level training, whether it's UPT or UT. Because when you go out in the field with your dog or you walk down to the water, you're not going to be alone. It's not going to be just you and your dog. You're going to have the judges, maybe apprentices in the field, judges, apprentices, gunners. I've gone to chapters where they have bleachers set up some 20 yards behind the duck search send point, and everybody's sitting in bleachers and watching your dog. At my chapter, they just set up chairs about 15 yards behind you, and everybody's watching you and your dog. So you do want to use groups to train in. Next slide. Yeah. Was that it?
Yeah, that was kind of when you and I were talking earlier. I think we had a real loose outline.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That was really it for the slides. No death by PowerPoint tonight.
Cool. We have no one's at risk of death tonight by PowerPoint.
Yeah, I mean, once we're kind of wrapping up what you have to say, we'll go into training resources and more questions. But I definitely encourage everybody to ask questions and, but Larry, please continue.
And so I'm going to share with you my philosophy first. And I lied. I'm not going to go philosophy first. I'm going to tell you this. In my experience with NAVHDA, there's a big difference geographically on what criteria people have in their training. So I'm going to share with you right now, before I even get into my philosophy, is that if your goal is the invitational, you're going to start your puppy with that invitational goal, you're going to want to do some things much differently than I do. And I'll pinpoint, and we'll get into that with force fetch or the trained hold. So out here, 95% of the NAVHDA membership out here don't participate in and will never, at least in the foreseeable future, participate in the invitational. So they have different goals and a different, how would I say it, level of performance for them to be satisfied with their dog. If I were to put it in the generic terms that are often used when I'm encouraging people to train at a higher level, they just look at me and go, I hunt my dog. My goal isn't to go through all these tests. And I try to explain to them, going through the utility test is going to give you a better dog. I don't care how you train for it. Use your own method, use my method, use invitational methods. You're going to have a better dog. But with that said, my duck search philosophy is simple. Keep it fun. Keep it fun. Your dog, when you're training duck search, in my philosophy, does not have a negative experience at the water. Okay? What we want to do is we want to build desire and difficulty simultaneously. We want to focus on your goal. And when I say that, before you even go down to the pond to do your duck search or start duck search, you want a goal on what you're training for. You know, what is your priority? And I tell you, so many times I've seen guys go down there and they start their dog on duck search, and their dog was successful at a very elementary way in their first run. But it comes back to the shore, they're 20 yards away and they drop the bird and the guy yells at them, you know, fetch, 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 or they shock the heck out of them. And then the dog picks it up and it comes back and then it drops it at their feet. Well, okay, you got a hole in your training, but you're not going to fix it while you're training for duck search. Go back home and work on that in your yard. Don't give your dog a negative consequence after it just did something along the lines that you wanted it to do in its performance, which was go out, find the duck, retrieve it. I see it happen over and over again. So that's why I just say, keep it fun. We're going to build desire and difficulty simultaneously. Stay focused on what you're down at the pond to train for, and use it as a learning experience to identify some holes, but fix them someplace else, guys. Don't fix it at your duck search training water. You come back to your duck search training water and test to see if what you did in your yard helped you. Don't try to fix it while you're doing this. And I don't know, does that make sense to you all?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting a definite maybe out of that. All right, perfect. Well, keep moving on. So I talked a little bit about force fetch and hold, and I am not going to get into force fetch. When I force fetch a dog, and I do force fetch on occasion, I'm retired. I take my time. What I do for most of my dogs, because I'm lucky, my dogs have a high degree of retrieve, I generally just do a trained hold. Meaning, as long as they hold that until I say out, I'm happy. I'm not going to worry about them taking blinds 200 yards or any of that. I'm just dealing with the hold and the delivery. So I do a trained hold, and that starts very similar to a force fetch start, but it stops much sooner. But it also lays the groundwork that I can go back to it reinforce it, and then move forward and do a full force fetch if I want to. But that's just how I start. And you know, everybody has their own method. A lot of people disagree, and that's fine. There's 100 ways to train dogs. Like I said, this is just one option.
Larry,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit and elaborate a little bit on what you see as the differences between a trained hold and force fetch?
Well, yes. I guess I'm going to do it quickly by skipping to the end or skipping to a midterm. On a trained hold, you're doing it so that your dog, and I'm going to get into it a little later, your dog will hold that bumper or that dead bird or that rolled up paper or whatever you're utilizing until you command out or drop, whatever your term is. And that's things that can be, you start on the table, and I do 3 points. I start with the canines, squeezing those upper canines, bumper in. And then once I get the dog reaching that way, I go to the ear pinch. And then from that, I go to the e-collar. So I've gone from the canines to the ear pinch to the e-collar with those 3 methods. And then once I have the e-collar embedded into the dog as the coercion to grab the bumper, then what I'll do is I just move the bumper down. So then it's sitting on the table and or laying on the table at the dog's feet. And then it's a foot out, so the dog takes a step. But you use your command, and the dog reaches out and get it. Once I do that so that the dog is going across the table, I use a 12-foot table. The dog is going up the ramp across the table, picking up the bumper and coming back. Then I move to the ground. But what I'll do there is I'll just do a little pile of ducks, maybe just 5 feet away. And when I say a little pile, maybe 2 or 3, and I'll just send the dog, because I'm keeping it very, very easy, very close. And the dog goes out, picks up the bird, brings it back, and holds it. And I focus on the hold. Now, when you're going force fetch, a lot of people at this point, they're going to extend that distance, and I extend the distance also. But they're going to drive the dog with the e-collar and drive them to that pile of bumpers or drive them to that pile of birds. And there are advantages in going through force fetch and coercing the dog because it'll take lines and a lot further, and but there's so many different steps in there. You have buckets, you have line drills, ladders, wheels, and it gets deeper into the retriever aspect. And force fetch is basically as you have so coerced the dog that the dog is not going to return without something. And it's going to stay out, whether it's in the field or in the water, but it's not coming back till it finds something and puts it in its mouth. I don't do that to that point. If my dogs will go out and pick up a bird in my backyard, which, it's like 150 feet across or something, I'm good. And that is if my dogs get a 3 and retrieve of a shot bird, I don't get excited about that. It doesn't hurt me. I use it as a how would I say it? I use it so that I'm successful in my hunt. And so my purpose of training and utility is to be successful in my hunting. And trust me, I took 2 dogs to the Invitational in New Mexico. Neither one, both came close, but neither one got it. and one of them missed it because I probably didn't coerce him hard enough to cross the water. He got a 2 in the long retrieve. So, and that's because of how I train. Anyway, I think we're just dwelling on that too much. It's the difference is you're just training your dog to hold versus fully force fetching your dog, driving them to bumpers, driving them on lines, wheels, ladders, whatever you want to call it. And it helps keep it fun. If you're an experienced guy, if you come from the retriever world, hey man, you do it your way. You do what works for you. But I just talk about all this, but I want to get to how I do duck search to keep it fun and keep the dog excited and get it to the point that when they see a body of water, they are dragging you down to the pond. That's what I want out of my dogs. Kind of a hassle in the duck blind, but I live with it. So what you're going to see too is not all dogs are cooperative enough to really be successful with just a trained hold. I'm going to throw that out there. They're just not going to do it. You're going to need to fully force fetch the dog. Those are the dogs that, yeah, they'll go out, they'll pick it up, and then they just spit it out. They don't bring it all the way back. They drop it at your feet. You're going to have to coerce those dogs and probably take advantage of a full force fetch to make the dog reliable. With that, we're gonna move from those simple little yard retrieves of dead ducks to the water, and this is where I want to make it fun for my dogs. And it's interesting. I had some folks come from another NAVHDA chapter, and they came out to do duck search training, and we had 4 dogs staked out. And we go ahead and get your dogs and stake them out. They absolutely refuse to do it. They go, no, we do not train that way. Well, we tend to. So we stake our dogs out so they can see the water. They can see the pond. They see the launch point, and they watch us set ducks for the beginner dogs. So we stake out our dogs. Our example is our pond is shallow enough that we can wade across to the cover on the opposite shore. It's only it's 40 to 80 yards depending on which cover you're aiming at. So we'll start short, and what I encourage people to do is just take a duck, throw it on a check cord, and literally with their dog on the shore, a partner or themselves will drag that duck across the open water to the cover. And then right on the edge of the cover on the outside, they'll unclick it, just toss it up in the air and have it drop. And then the handler, hopefully you're working in pairs or teams, the handler sends their dog. The dog's going to be really excited, or should be really excited and animated. If it isn't, you've got some work to do to build desire in the dog, but it should just be nuts at this point. And we send the dog across. Dog comes back, makes the delivery, and what we'll do is we'll set it up again. And if the dog was really strong, we'll just move on, and instead of dragging it all the way back across, we'll just have the partner who's still out in the cover throw a duck out into the open water on a check cord, drag the duck into the cover a foot or two, just so it's out of sight of the dog and into the cover. We'll send the dog again, and it should go get the duck, come back. Well, with this, as your dog progresses, you're going to make it more and more difficult. After a few of these in the open water, and with each one, you extend the distance into the cover. you're going to get it to the point where it's just automatic. You need to spice it up for the dog and increase difficulty, and it can come very quickly. So what we'll do is we'll take a similar setup, and we'll move deeper into the cover, and we just toss the duck up into the air. And the dog sees the duck go in the air, and the duck comes down and splashes. Now we'll have the handler walk the dog off. Now, depending on the dog, you might do a simple 360 at the water's edge, set your dog up and send it. But the purpose here is to build memory, and you'll go from a 360 to walking your dog off 5 feet, 10 feet, taking your dog back to the truck, throwing it in a crate, pulling it out, walking back down to the water's edge, setting your dog up and sending it. Now, as you do this and you're extending distance, what you also want to do is increase difficulty by making the duck more mobile. At this point, we're using live, fully fledged ducks. But if you just throw them out in the water, you're just gonna be throwing birds away. So we use engineered tape. Well, flagging ribbon is how most of you identify it. And we'll tie the wings back. So the wings are basically the first joint of the wings are tied together, their shoulders right over the back of the duck. This enables them to flap and excite your dog. They can dive, but it inhibits them quite a bit. I've also seen where you just duct tape down one wing and leave one wing free. We'll also inhibit the duck's movement by tying the feet together. You could zip tie them. But the key here is you want to give the duck some mobility and some flash to excite the dog, to build more desire and more drive, because there's nothing like chasing birds for a dog to get excited. And chasing ducks is all about it, and duck search is all about excitement. So as we move through, we make the duck more and more mobile. To build distance, we're using our same formula. And remember, as we build distance, we're also building our delay in the dog as we're walking the dog off and letting them just remember that the duck was out there. So we build distance, and now how you build distance is you don't drag a duck. What you'll do is you'll do a spot. You'll put the duck down, maybe drag it 5 feet, pick it up, and you're going to go 10 or 15 feet farther up the cover. Drop it again, pick it up, go another 10 or 15 feet. So that what the dog is doing is the dog is coming to scent, losing it and searching, picking up scent. Again, we want it close enough so the dog is successful in relocating the scent trail, far enough apart so the dog has to work it, and they just can't walk down this oil slick of duck scent to a duck. So you keep extending that. And we normally do that now out about 125 yards. So as we do this, depending on each dog, because we treat each dog differently, it's what the handler wants to do with their dog, is by the time you start getting into those spots of scent and more mobile ducks, you're not throwing anything for your dog. You're bringing your dog down, and I use a cue. I cue my dog on duck search, is I just say dead duck, dead duck, dead duck. So by the time I say dead duck a third time, they're ready to go, and I just send the dog. And that is where you want to be. You want to be to the point where you are restraining your dog. Your dog knows that in this cover, there's a duck, and they just want to go and get it. So you go, well, that's fine, Larry, but I don't train where I test. Well, great. That's actually perfect. So where you train, what you're going to do is you're going to move to a different part of the pond. Maybe you're going to reverse it, give the dog a different picture, use different cover, different launch points, and then you're going to move to another pond and you're going to do the same thing. Now you might go to the pond, line up your dog and send him, and he looks at you and goes, I have no idea what you want me to do. So you're going to have to take a few steps back. Now, if your dog was force fetched and you sent him, he's going to go. But I have success with this because generally my dogs are fairly high desire and they want to go. And after they've chased and caught some 20 or 30 ducks, it's just what they want to do. So that's kind of a shake and bake version, but as you are building desire and drive, you might find that it gets too easy for your dog too quickly, and you have to make it more difficult. You've got to move the duck further. You've got to use different parts of the pond, expose them to different pictures and scenes. And the pond we train on is 11 acres with 5 acres of cover. And basically, in a fairly short time, the dogs, you can send the dog from any point on the shore, and the dog is going to cross and go hit cover, or it's going to hit some near cover and then expand out across to other cover. And when your dog's doing that, you should be fairly confident in moving to other water and expanding their experience and confidence by using other ponds. Now, once again, this is how I do it because I want it to be fun. I want the dog to be excited. If I'm not having maybe a little difficulty in controlling my dog as I walk down to the duck search, I feel I did something wrong in their exposure and training. I want the dog on edge. As a matter of fact, when I do duck search, I use a collar with a clip, not a buckle and holes. I just use a clip. I have my leash on it. I have my shotgun in my right hand. The blank is already in it. We get down to the water's edge. I woe the dog. I hit the clip. I don't even take the leash off. I just hit the clip. The weight of the leash pulls it to the ground. I shoot 1,000 fetch and send my dog. And that's the sequence that I use. People get upset to use a lot of ducks this way, but that same person will take their dog to the field and they'll take 10 pigeons or 10 chuckers to the field to run in the fields one day, but they'll go down to train duck search and they'll bring one duck. I go down to train duck search. I have at least 2 ducks for every dog I'm training. And depending on how well they do, I'll take 3. Also, the dogs will condition themselves, or I won't say condition, but if you did your trained hold, they're going to bring you back live ducks. And you're going to reuse them. And the best thing to do is wait till everybody's done training and then send your dogs out to go get all the ducks that the other people's dogs left behind. And you'll never buy a duck the rest of the training season. But now I'm sure there's some questions, unless y'all went to sleep.
I have a couple. I just want to ask, I have 2 right now. A clarifying question. One is, so would you say if your ultimate goal is invitational, you would lean towards fully force fetching your dog, but if your goal is to have a good hunting dog, you might start with a trained hold unless the dog requires force fetch. Is that kind of where you're going with that, or?
Well,
there?
I think so, but I don't like the way it's phrased. I would say, because to say that invitational dogs aren't good hunting dogs is a misnomer.
No, yeah, and that's not what I meant.
I would say if your goal is the invitational, force fetch your dog. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily force fetch to achieve a high performing field dog.
Right.
Okay. But there's a big difference between a high performing field dog and the disciplined, controlled invitational dog, which is also a high performing dog.
Right.
You know, my dogs run, and I'll tell you, in both of their braces, the dogs they ran with could run too. So that was kind of fun. So yeah, I guess I'd go back. I don't enjoy force fetching dogs. So if I don't have to force fetch my dog, I don't.
Yeah.
But if my dog is targeted for the invitational and I have a little girl that I'm training now, and I hope to take her to Iowa in 2 years, yeah, she's getting force fetched.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My other question is, can you talk a little bit about the resend? A lot of people that I've talked to seem to be concerned about the resend. If you're short on time or you don't have that full, time frame of the duck search, are there any common problems you see and what you might do to?
Yes, and I'm going to talk in terms of how we train and, dragging ducks out into the pond, so forth. If you remember, we take the first bird, we drag it across, but we have our partner on the backside and they're throwing a second bird up in the air and then right outside and dragging it in for the dog. Whenever we train, and we train in pairs at least or in teams, there's always another duck. Always another duck. If I go out and train by myself, I put 2 ducks out for my dogs. Every dog on every send has at least 2 ducks out. And what you're going to see with your dog is that was one of Alicia's poodle pointers barking, if you couldn't recognize the
Oh, don't blame that on me.
Yeah.
What do you call that? Your little fur ball?
That's my wife's little kick me dog. Quiet. So always have, I prefer to always have 2 ducks out. And you know what? You always have a rock star that you could have 20 out and that dog's not going to stop. It's going to go and go and go. So you're going to lose some ducks, but ducks are real Houdinis when they're loose and in the water. Those ducks that those judging teams are putting out, they are unrestrained. They are wing clipped on one wing, whether it's pulled or cut. And they're Houdinis. Your dog has to experience that. Your dog has to understand how to pick up the trail of a duck that submerged and swam 15 yards away. And they can't learn that if you're not using free ranging ducks and risking the loss. Because what that dog will do is it'll search, and that oil that came off that duck is going to float to the surface sooner or later, and the dog's going to pick up that duck and track it down again. So I think resend is important to train for. How once again, to give you a little more information than you want, is I go by time. If my dog goes out, beats his brains in for 15 minutes and brings me back a duck, I'm not sending him again. We're done. That dog is done for the day. And I'm talking about a loose full ranging duck that this boy just beat his brains in the bull rush and cover for 15 minutes. And the reason why I do that is I want to keep it fun. If you send that dog again and they beat their brains in for 10 or 15 minutes, you know, it's not as much fun. It really isn't. It's, you know, it's like being a lineman in football. It's a lot of fun when you're running the ball and everything's clicking, but if that defensive lineman is beating your brains in with his forearm, rattling your Rydell all night, it ain't a lot of fun. So, so keep it fun. Watch your dog. You got to read your dog. If your dog's not having fun, take a step back, look at what you're doing, and try to determine why your dog isn't having fun. My dogs want to duck search. They want to go. I don't. Heck, half the time they don't even wait for me to send them. They just go. I don't know if I answered that or not, but I gave it a shot.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
To get a dog, there's more than one question, to expand his search. I'm sorry I got in a little late. I had a hawk fly into my pigeon loft, so I had to take care of that first. Maybe I didn't hear that part. How do you get your dogs that are going, that are hitting the water, that are swimming hard, to expand on a 4-acre pond?
Well, and I guess I'll qualify my response with, I'm not looking at your pond, so I really don't know what we have to work with. But what I would do is I'd look for cover. And so, for example, how far does the dog have to swim to hit cover?
The first amount of cover about, I don't know, 30, 40 yards.
Okay. Now, is there cover behind that?
There's
that
cover
the dog can expand
that.
into?
Yes.
So it would be really easy to condition the dog to go to the first piece of cover, right?
Yes.
So now to get him to the second piece, what I would probably do, and this is like speed training your bird dog, is I would just simply drop a duck in your first piece of cover and drag it to the second.
Okay.
And your dog's going to go to that first piece, look, pick up the scent trail, take it to the second. Now, you can do that a couple times, but after that, you got to increase difficulty. So what you might do is just drag the bird out 10 feet, pick it up, and walk it out or canoe out another 10 or 15 feet, drag it, get a little, 5 feet of duck grease on the water and move on a little further and then drop it into the cover so that the dog is going to condition itself. It's going to hit the scent that's close to the first cover. It's going to take it and it's going to stop. The scent runs out. But you know what? I know the last time I did this, if I keep going, I'm going to hit scent and I can follow it. So they're going to go that 10 or 15 feet and hit that scent you laid. That'll reinforce them, and then they'll go out and they're going to lose the scent again, but they're going to cover that 15 or 20 feet and they're going to hit scent again, and then they're going to go into the cover. So you just give them those gaps, and the dog learns that it's kind of like line drills for their nose. The dog takes the line and it runs out of nose, runs out of scent. But he knows, well, I'm going to stay on this line or keep working in this direction. And then they pick it up again and the nose takes them out again. Like the puppy on the track that leaves the track, loops back around, hits it, takes it for 10 or 15 yards, leaves it, loops back around, hits it further out. Same thing.
Okay.
So that's what I would try. And then you want to do that in different directions. and build it so that the dog isn't just going out, out, out. It's going to go out and then maybe go left, and then the next time you go right, and then you just want to build it so that the dog learns that there are more options than just traveling in a straight line.
Second question, on, you know, a 5-acre pond that has decent cover, there's really not a bank because it goes up into like flooded pine trees, palmetto heads, all this kind of stuff. A lot of the times the ducks shoot pretty much white feathers and throw them out. They will go into that shallower water, hide in the palmetto heads and that kind of stuff. With this being said, a dog that will swim across the pond, get into the shallower water that does not have to swim, it can hop, jump, but his feet are hitting the ground and almost simulating running the bank. What would you suggest?
Well, you know, I'm having a hard time visualizing it because I'm thinking lunging depth water. Is it lunging depth, or are we talking like ankle deep?
Oh, no, you're talking about coming up halfway up their body.
Okay, so it's lunging depth water.
Okay.
Meaning that the dog has to push through it. It's not 6-inch deep water that's on some grass flat, or whether it's, you know, timbered or whatever, doesn't matter. So if they have lunging depth, dogs can get a lot of fun. They can have a lot of fun in lunging depth water. I would do the same thing, but I would put some fairly mobile ducks back there, meaning at least one wing free, or maybe just tie both of the wings on their back. And do you guys all know what I mean by tying their wings?
Right. Yes. Just like pigeons.
Yeah, except you literally take a piece of engineered tape and tie them. So I would do that. And what you can do too is I take duct tape and I tape their feet closed. So the ducks are going to paddle like crazy, but they're just paddling with pencils. And so it slows them down, but they're still quite mobile. So the wings are free, their feet are free, but they're really inhibited. They're at 60% maneuverability or so. If you have obstacles in there that'll the duck can use to keep the dog off of them, your dog can have a great time to get in there and chase ducks back in there. And they'll learn real quick. Where a dog has fun is just another place it wants to go visit again. Okay?
What about water that becomes, because it tapers off the further it gets into the woods, and let's say it's ankle deep, you know, 6 inches deep.
What's the distance?
The distance
From your launch point to ankle deep water, what are you talking?
25, 30 feet.
From your launch point?
Oh, from my launch point to ankle deep water? Oh, 75 yards.
Okay, well, so that's all that training area right there has to offer you, is that 75-yard extension. But are there other parts of the pond that you could increase the extension range or the range?
Absolutely. The pond is probably only about 130, 140 feet wide and about 250 yards long.
All right. So yeah, I would just, it goes back to my point about you got to change the picture. Your dog is doing that. Okay, great. You got that down. Now let's give the dog a different picture. Move to a different part of the pond. Use a different angle, send your dog in a different direction, and keep extending the dog's range. And once again, sometimes these things are as simple as just reverse it.
Right.
And send the dog. But if you have, well, for example, our 11-acre pond, when it's at full pool, you probably have, holy smokes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You probably have a dozen places you can launch from,
Right.
and each one presents a different picture for the dog. So that's all I would do is, if to get a dog to 75 yards, especially when 25 of it's lunging depth or less, that can happen pretty quick, and then you want to move on.
Now,
That might be a place where you put your second duck when you train.
do you have any objections of using a launcher that with a quacker on the furthest end of the pond and maybe tying an empty hull to the flagging tape and put it in there to draw that dog to that further end, the 200 yards for him to make that swim down there?
Well, do I have an aversion to it? I'm going to answer it this way. You know your resources, you know your pond, you know your training partners. You got to do what you got to do. I know a lot of folks that use launchers and quack. And I'm not a fan of it personally because I don't want my dogs to get how would I say it? Conditioned.
Yeah.
To the sound. I'm one of those guys that I love training with drakes, but I want to test on a hen. So, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions? Any input? Any thoughts?
Now, I do want to share with y'all that I live in Oregon. So as a result, my biorhythms are a little off. My aura is a little gray. Measure 114 passed. I spent 6 hours at the sporting goods store just to buy a frickin' gun. So.
Oh dear.
So it is just so stinking liberal. It just drives me batty.
How much snow do you have?
114 was a gun control measure that passed.
My brother's complaining severely about that, and we are definitely rethinking our retirement locations.
Well, I think we're going to have it for a couple years, but I believe it's unconstitutional. I mean,
well, it's going to get tied up in court. It must.
Oh yeah, it's going to take years. The suits are already filed.
Yeah.
But yeah, just one of those things. I have my concealed carry, and I was 4,757 in the queue out of 22,000 and change.
Wow.
For background checks, which is ridiculous. I mean, I got a top secret clearance.
Yeah.
I got my concealed carry. It's going. You guys are just wasting my time. Anyway, if you have some questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. All I wanted to do was share with you a very simple method that we use to keep dogs excited and search in water. It works well for us. Like I said, I don't have an aversion of burning ducks. I know a lot of people do. They want to buy 3 ducks and train their dog for duck search on 3 ducks.
Well, I think that goes back to it takes birds to make a bird dog. I mean, you just have to do it if you really want to give yourself the best opportunity possible to do well.
Well, one of the things I will share is one of the advantages of force fetch is generally you can get a softer mouth and you can get to the point where you are reusing duck after duck. My duck's longevity is tied directly to how hard they make my dogs work. The harder my dog has to work to catch a duck, the less likely that duck is going to make it to the shore breathing.
Question, Mr. Larry?
Sure.
How long do you let a chase go on?
Well, chases are tough. I don't really, a chase can be the greatest thing in the world with a green dog that needs to build desire.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
I want my dogs to encounter the free ranging birds, create a chase, but my expectation is higher for the duck. I want my ducks to do their Houdini stuff and elude my dog, because I want my dog to go from losing that duck to establishing an intelligent search in an attempt to relocate that duck that, say, dove and swam 15 yards into cover.
I think that's one of the most challenging things we've dealt with in our limited training of utility. I mean, we've run only three dogs in utility, but there's definitely been a difference in those dogs that are more apt to stick with it, I guess, than to give up when a duck dives. I mean, to us, like, we really get excited when we've got a dog that continues, you know, on a diving duck and figures that out. Really, it's a matter of figuring it out.
Well, and I'm going to share with you, and we got a couple judges on, is judges are not impressed by a dog that contacts a duck, is chasing it, the duck dives and goes out of sight, and the dog quits and comes back to the handler. That is not impressive. A dog just had a bird contact. It should be amped up and wired. The last thing it should be thinking about is coming back to daddy or mama. It should be thinking, how can I find that duck again? So it's a fine line, and you make mistakes between duck mobility and making them too mobile and the dog losing it too quickly, or not mobile enough and it makes it too easy on the dog. And I'll guarantee you, each dog, as you train, if you train in a group, or if you take 3 down to the pond and train like I do, it's different. I mean, I rarely do the same setup for dogs, but the last point I want to make is, once you get your dog doing 4 duck searches, now you're in maintenance mode. You are not doing duck searches 3 times a week. My rule of thumb is I try to do a duck search when my dog's doing 4s, maybe every 1 a week, at most 1 every 5 days, but you're in maintenance mode. And as long as your dog is dragging your butt down to the water's edge, why do you want to run the risk of turning that dog off by making it work too hard? And that's the thing. Working hard is fun for the reward of the adrenaline rush and the chase and the capture of the duck and the retrieve. It is not fun to go out there and search and beat your brains in and not catch something. And certainly it's not fun to go out there and do that for 20 minutes. And I guarantee you, there are a lot of dogs out there that are going to remember that the next time you drag them down. Your dog must be successful. Must. That needs to be part of your training plan and set up for each dog. If everything goes to crap, that dog still needs to get a duck and make a retrieve. That's the rules I go by, and I'm just a guy that's been doing this for a few years, and yeah, I've had success with some dogs, and I've had some dogs that that weren't the most successful things in the world, but I know that my dogs that are having fun duck search.
Hey, Larry, I know you mentioned earlier about, like whenever the judges say, well, that's good, we're good with this dog. Could you expand on like what a judging team is looking for whenever they say, well, maybe it's not the 10 minutes, but we're good?
Well, okay, there are so many variables, you know, and let's face it, to cover a 10-acre pond or frankly, some of these places where you're literally testing on a lake, um, you know, the 10 minutes doesn't give the dog a whole lot of time to cover what some judges would call the 4 quadrants. So what the judges are looking for is they want to see the dog demonstrate, of course, desire, but they want to see an intelligent search. They don't want to see a dog that repeatedly covers the same ground. We want to see a dog that expands, is constantly moving forward. Basically, a dog that's experienced enough and trusts itself enough to go, you know what? I've been there, done that. There's no duck there. I'm moving on. And that they do that and they just keep extending or moving out. Now, you have a dog that does that and it's hitting, you know, 4 pieces of cover and it's out 120 yards and we're at 9 minutes and the dog's still working hard and moving away. I'll just look at my judging team and, you know, I go, you guys good? And then they go, yeah, we're good. I go, call your dog. You can have some very, very difficult ponds. And I love to use this. First time I showed Phil our pond, he looks at me and he just goes, Larry, this is a very intimidating pond. And I said, what, you think? You think, Phil? And he goes, yes. And I go, okay. So,
This is Phil Swain you're talking about?
Yeah, Phil. And so the difficult water, you may not need to see as long a period and the dog may not cover as much ground because amount of effort and desire the dog has to exhibit to just perform in a, you know, in that oppressive cover. So, you know, the judging teams, you know, I always get impressed about how quickly judging teams mold and get on the same track. And it doesn't take long. And, you know, when they call it, they've seen what they've needed to see. And very, very rarely, if your dog has an opportunity to improve their score, they're going to call it at 10 minutes. If you're teetering on the edge and they're going, you know, if this dog will just extend this next 30 or 40 yards over into this cover over here, I'm good. And you sit there and you wait and you try to get the dog to, or you hope that the dog does it. So most of the time in my experience is when you're going over 10, is the judging team's trying to give the dog that last opportunity to improve their score and attain that 4, or maybe move from a 2 to a 3. And that's why you have the 10-minute minimum unless proper judgment can be determined sooner. Did I answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that answered my question.
Can I
Thank you.
May I ask another question unless somebody else?
Alicia told me everybody gets 2, so you're going to have to get her permission if you want to ask another.
Oh, Chris, go ahead. We don't have a super talkative bunch tonight for some reason.
Recalling the dog after you send it on a duck search and it has not found a dog. I find that to be a little bit difficult.
Well, you know,
because the dog's coming back deflated. I failed. I mean,
in my training, I never bring my dog back. If my dog is searching and working, I don't bring him back. I don't bring him back until I get to the point where now I'm worried about the dog losing it, you know, losing their drive, losing their desire, overworking. And that generally takes me into over 20 minutes and gets you into closer to a half hour. But early on, when you're developing your dog, you know, like our cover is ugly, nasty stuff. I don't know if y'all know what bulrush is, but bulrush is that cover that if you went out there in your waders and you wanted to cut across 30 yards of it to set out your decoys, well, heck, it might be noon before you hit the open water to set out your decoys. It's nasty stuff. But so you
when
just got to
judges-
read your dog.
Yeah, when the judges tell you to get your dog and you never called him off a duck,
Yeah, that can be a problem.
what do you suggest?
Well, you know, that's all part of your recall.
Oh,
Uh,
so now they're
you
going
know,
to
that's
give you
part,
cooperation.
that's all part of your obedience training. Because I'm an overweight, middle-aged, bald-headed man with glasses, when I go chucker hunting and my dogs go down the slope and they're down on point, and you know, because birds they'll go downhill and they might follow the scent of a covey down 400 yards and maybe 400 feet in elevation loss. And I may not want to go down there, and I'll just call my dogs off point. And people will go, "You're doing what?" And I'm going, "I'm lazy. I ain't going all the way down there because I got to walk all the way back up, and I'm not doing it for a single bird or a small covey." So you can train your dog to come in off of that, and you should work on it. But I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over it.
Okay.
If your dog has done a 4 duck search and you have problems with recall, it's going to impact your obedience score on the event, and it may impact your cooperation score on the event. It's a rare judging group that discusses lowering a search score because of a recall issue. I just don't experience that.
Okay.
So,
Because
but
I'd have to get in the boat, paddle out there and throw a dead duck out there, and then she'll beat me back to the bank.
well, you know, and that's fine. But if you remember, one of the basic rules I have is your dog must be successful. So you have to keep that in mind in your plan, and that is, if your dog is out there and it's been 20 minutes or 15 minutes or whenever you want to call it, you should have something set up for your dog to find the bird.
Right.
And heck, I've had guys with bird bags and they're running the bank. They're in stealth mode, running the bank, trying to get in a position where they can lay a duck in the line that dog's taking. And that pays dividends. I mean, so the dog got out 250 yards. But hey, Dad, look what I found way the heck out here.
Oh,
And then they come back. That's just good work.
Hey Larry, in your duck search that you guys do at Central Oregon, do you guys ever use kayaks or do you not need to in that water?
We use kayaks. It depends. In spring, the water's high enough. We generally need a kayak or somebody 6'4" or taller with full armpit chest waders.
Okay.
But in our fall tests, because the irrigation water, you know, it's canal fed, so that drops, and you could probably go walk all the way across it with a pair of chest waders.
Right. Okay.
Thank you for answering my question, Mr. Stone.
No problem at all, sir. Are you still feeding that dog?
Am I?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I feed my dogs.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about that was your girl that got the VC, right?
Yes, sir. She got lucky.
He did not.
Well, you know what? Hey, it is what it is. You know, I was lucky enough to be second at the blind retrieve 2 days in a row. It worked for me on one dog, didn't work for me on the other. Oh, well.
That was a little bit tricky blind retrieve, because if that dog didn't focus on that pile of dirt over there and the wind didn't come one way or the other, the dog's going to go into a duck search, because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, I mean, my male kind of did that. My female, she just played me a little bit. I mean, she's standing on the bank over by one of the, the border points, staring at me. And then she goes, okay, fine, I'll go do it. And she turns and she goes right across, goes right to the duck, grabs it, and comes back. And I'm going, you knew to do that the whole frickin' time. You were just playing games. But anyway, any other questions?
Anybody?
If that's it, I'm going to go cook dinner.
Oh Lord, I was gonna say going once, going twice. Okay, well,
I
real
wouldn't
quick.
let it go that easy.
Yeah. Uh-oh. You got more questions, Chris?
Of course I do. I try to learn all I can from everybody.
Well,
Bank runners.
hey, Chris, I'm going to say something before you ask a question. And that is, you brought up a great point. And I'm a firm believer in expose yourself to all kinds of methods and cherry pick those things that you feel will work for you.
And your dog.
And your dog or dogs.
Yeah.
It's like, buying one book and training your dog. Well, why not buy 3 and use parts of all 3?
100%.
Anyway, okay, your question?
It sounds like you got a great pond, right? Some ponds are a little more difficult down here when you got to paddle them every morning and look at them at night for alligators.
Well, yeah, but you got to realize that our pond's on BLM, Bureau of Land Management land.
Oh, okay.
Part of it. The other part is private. It's owned by the irrigation district, and that's the part we use because we don't need permits to use it. COID allows us to use it because we're good stewards. We clean it up. We haul probably 1,000 pounds of garbage off their property every year.
Got it. Dog runners.
Is it a great pond? Yeah, but that doesn't mean you don't come across campsites with syringes, dirty diapers, broken glass.
No.
All those lovely things you would expect to find at a pond that's 10 miles from a city of 100,000 people. It's and on public land. So there are challenges using that water. It's not perfect by any means.
Bank runners. Bank runners, ones that like to run if they got a clear path around the bank. How do you stop it? Or how would you stop it? What is your advice?
Well, I'll tell you what I do, and then you're going to say, God, Larry, you're different. Out here, we compete with the retriever guys. And whenever the retriever guys are at a pond, because we all use the same, 4 or 5 ponds, I just pull out a chair and I sit and watch them. And, if there's anybody that wants to tell you how to do something, it's a retriever trainer. Hopefully we don't have any in the audience. But so what they do is they set up their retrieve so the dog is going across, say, the corner of a body of water. So it's very tempting, and they're sending their dog. So Chris, let's say you have a round pond, and we're going to just go with the north, south, east, and west. You're sending your dog from the south, but the bird is at your eastern center point.
Okay.
So the dog is very tempted to run that bank, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, what they do is they have their e-collars on, and they'll give the dog a line and they'll send it. And they do it a number of different ways. But they'll send the dog, and as it's running the bank, they're stemming it and they're going fetch, fetch, fetch. And so what happens is the dog eventually steps into the water and takes the water route, and they stop stemming. But it's a little piece at a time. So it's going to start running the bank, and then it's okay. I'm going to cut the corner a little bit and go into the water, and then pretty soon they're just going right across.
I get it.
But that's how they do it on the corners. What I would suggest is not do that, but just to use a smaller body of water where you're sending your dog across. Maybe it's a rectangle, and you start in the center and send your dog across just this 30-yard little pond, and then just move left until it's tempted by the shore, and correct it when it runs the shore, bring it back, send it back across.
Okay.
But that's where your line drills come in, and training on your line drills and your ladders will help for the dog to just take it straight across. But you can do that, and you can move right and do the same thing. I have more of a problem is the dog will go out, but they want to run the bank back.
Yes.
And I just do fetch, 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 and I stem them every time I say fetch until they straighten out and hit the water, and then I come off of it. And as long as they stay in the water, I don't stem them anymore.
Got it.
And you do that, and eventually their time on land gets shorter and shorter and shorter. That's what I do. But what I would suggest is you get a retriever guy to witness what you're going through, or get an experienced NAVHDA guy to observe it and help you through it.
Well,
one of the things about these discussions is what I am seeing in my mind may not be what you're trying to explain to me. So
no, and you're correct, 100% correct. And it's I see other people with other dogs that have a problem, and then I watched and know several people that have whistle dogs that they can stop them and get hands and all of that.
That girl I'm force fetching, she's getting whistle trained. Oh yeah, I'm not going to go to the long retrieve again without a dog that I can't stop and give a back to, or no,
Right.
That ain't happening. I learned my lesson.
Okay. I was just wondering, I was trying to think of different ways to correct it, and I wanted to hear your way. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying I use, and that is, do you know why a dog does something it knows it's wrong?
Easy.
And my opinion is very simple. Because the consequence it receives for doing it does not outweigh the gratification it receives for doing it.
Yeah.
So if you have a problem with something, the consequence has to increase to the point where the dog's not getting paid dividends to do that behavior. The reward they get from the behavior cannot exceed the consequence you give them. The consequence has to exceed their reward. So it might take you a while to find that.
Right.
But
that reminds me of the rat study.
Yeah.
Have you read about the rat study about stimulation on rats and
Democrats? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. But it's
I'm watching Alicia. Hey, come on. We can have some fun here. Jeez.
I didn't say anything.
I really like Larry.
I'm sure you do.
Anyway, yeah, there's all kinds of methods you guys can use. And I encourage you. Hey, I would, just because I presented this little fun method to do it, I would not be hurt if not a single person tried it. It's fine. You guys do what works for you. And
I like the slick on the water. I definitely like that. I really do. Setting out birds. I like the slick idea.
Well, just think test. What is the dog going to encounter in the test to
Right.
lead him or her to the bird.
Right.
And so you got to train them to track and trail.
Right.
And I kid you not, I watched ducks come out of the cover, swim 40 yards across open water to another patch of cover, and you sit there and you go, well, dang, that duck's gone. And then out comes the dog,
Yeah.
trailing them right across the water into the other cover.
No, I like that. That was definitely. I'd sit and listen another hour just to hear that again because I really like that idea. And you know,
You flatter me, sir. Hey, but with that, I got to go cook dinner.
have a good. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks.
Okay.
You guys all take care.
Hopefully, I'll see you in 2 years with another little rotten dog.
Well, I'm going to try to take my mail back. You know, I want to take both dogs back, and then I want to take my little girl, but you know what? It's good to have wants and needs. Doesn't mean you're going to fulfill them. Anyway, you all take care.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Bye, Alicia.
Bye, Larry. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so I've got the training resources page up. It hasn't changed from the last one. If anybody has any other training resources that they would like to recommend or that they think would be good as far as utility training, that's great. Our next, let me go back here. Our next part 3 fieldwork and steadiness, and that's going to be with Herb Christian, another senior and invitational judge with NAVHDA. That's going to be January 17th. So if we already have you signed up, I think you automatically should get the invitation. But if you want to sign up again, just to be sure, great. Hopefully everybody got something out of this and you know, it was helpful to everyone. That's largely definitely our goal. And yeah, so that's where we're at. Does anybody have any questions for me or any questions about, you know, future part 3, part 4, anything like that before we sign off for the night?
Did you read that article?
What's that?
Did you read the article I sent you?
I
All right, caught you. You hadn't done it, have you? You hadn't done it. No, I see you now. Go ahead and cover your head. Get your hoodie and put your hoodie.
No, I'm not going to do that because I started to read it, but things have been busy at work and we are postponing the newsletter that was supposed to go out this week. Instead, we're going to do a stunted email that just kind of does the bold advertising for the Black Friday sales that I announced at the beginning of this session. And then we're going to take a little bit more time to really do a much better newsletter and get it more robust than what we have right now, because we're still waiting on some content.
In your chops, Jeff.
I know you were, but I did.
I read his article and it's very good.
Yeah. See?
Oh, I know Jeff did. He read it that night.
Well, some people are retired and don't have a full-time job.
You hear it? Wham! The ambulance is coming. Do you hear that?
You just wait. Just wait. I'm gonna get you.
All right, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you.
All right.
Alicia.
Yes, Brighton, yes.
On this.
Good night.
Good night,
this
Jeff.
part,
Good night, Chris.
Good night. This part and the previous one. There any way you could get me the recordings sent so that I can go ahead and kind of start doing some cleanup for the afterwards video?
Yeah,
so that I've not got 4 parts that are 4 hours long to try and do all at once.
Right. Let's take that conversation offline because I was gonna bring it up to you anyways. I have a call right after this meeting. Russ, hi, I see you. Looking forward to talking to you. But Brayton, I have a very long car ride on the worst travel day of the year tomorrow. So let's talk about it tomorrow. Are you free?
I guess I'll see. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but we'll discuss that.
All right. Yeah. No, I have the recordings. Yes, in answer to that question, but let's talk about it. All right. Anybody else? Russ, I will call you. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time.